Hi, John. Welcome to another episode of Hybrid Chats. How are you?
I'm very good, Irina. Very good indeed. Thank you. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, excellent. Likewise. I think for the first time in a while, we're actually in the same country. Doesn't happen often. We have our globe-trotting lives for sure. We're talking about this just before we started. You're living the dream of being able to go see as many sports competitions around Europe. I'm living the dream of working remotely from various places like Vietnam a lot of the time. Well, under 6 months, let's say that, and in a year. But right now we're both in Ireland. I'm in Dublin, and I believe you're back in Cork.
I am in Cork, but have laptop will travel.
That's it. I think I need to get this as a tattoo. Definitely fits. Well, anyways, we are now, I believe this is like the 1 year anniversary of our podcast, John. I think we've been doing this for a year. We started in March 2023, thinking like, yeah, I think you and I have some things to talk about, and there's definitely some funky stuff in media. It probably needs a little bit of myth busting and or confirming. So here we are. We're still doing that.
Yep.
So happy anniversary, I suppose. And today we're gonna really, as usual, probably, but feels like talk about hybrid even more. It definitely feels like there's been an evolution of what we see in media, and a lot of the things for this episode feel like let's almost stop debating the whole like should it be hybrid, should it be in office, and let's just focus on making it work. And we have some great articles on that we're going to get to in a minute. But first up, we have an article in the Australian Financial Review, and that one fits the bill of let's see how to do this right. So basically, the article starts off by saying, look, return to office mandates, they're not working. So let's just, stop pretending that we can somehow, make it work. However, one of the reasons why oftentimes companies may have an issue with not being in the office and doing more hybrid is for the sake of young employees. They're saying basically someone kind of just straight out of college, do they have the work ethic to be left to their own devices, to do work remotely, to get to know the people, to be onboarded remotely? Maybe we need them in the office. So the author proposes an interesting solution to that around, how young people are brought into the office, for how long, who, kind of helps onboard them and stuff. What are your observations of
Well,
what's being said in the article?
I mean, it's a very interesting article, and as the headline suggests, the study in the Australian Financial Review found that performance and market valuations at companies with mandates just didn't improve compared to those that didn't have return to office mandates. But on the flip side, or not on the flip side, but companies with mandates then also had a negative, which is they suffered some significant falls in stuff like employee satisfaction after introducing their return to office, let's call it mandate. So what Professor Mark Ma from the University of Pittsburgh, who's the professor behind this report, in his proposed model, what he is suggesting is that newer employees, as you mentioned, would be required to work in the office and receive the training and all that kind of stuff, and that trained employees who I suppose stay within a company for at least 3 years would then, in his model, would then be given the freedom to go work from home. Um, and the hope in that is that it would encourage employees to stay longer in a company and work harder. So overall, the idea being brought forward in this bit of research is that the newer and younger employees would get the support and guidance that they need, while more experienced employees would help them to learn and help them to acclimatize in the culture, but also would be given the space for themselves to focus on their work and would be rewarded with loyalty and flexibility. They're the observations from it, but I think it leads into a couple more questions.
It really does, because while on face value, I get the point, and
Mm-hmm.
there's probably something to be said. I mean, I was a long time ago at my first job and a young employee out of college, and at the time, I was going to the office every day. I didn't love it, but I didn't know any better, and it probably helped me to be better onboarded. But I do wonder, like, does this create a bit of inequality? Like, if you're the young employee that probably, had to do a lot of college through COVID, did it remotely, and then you come into the workforce, and then your colleagues are allowed to work remotely while you kind of are not, and like maybe not trusted fully. Like, does that not create a bit of inequality and, biased treatment?
Yeah, I mean, look, the approach is really interesting in that it what it does really is it addresses the concern that we have seen and we've talked about in previous episodes, and that's the concern that many leaders seem to have. And I suppose the best way to encapsulate that concern is, oh, new hires won't learn the same way as I did. Now, it's to me, it's an interesting twist on what I would call the age-old problem, which is let's base the future on the past. Now, you have to actually bring some stuff from the past into the future, but you don't automatically. We don't, when we're planning for 2025, we don't try to take 2015 and lob it into 2025 because an awful lot of things have changed. So that doesn't always work. So here we have challenges that are significant. Um, and but if this approach helps some leaders get past their own biases, then I think it has some merit. So there are industries that are real laggards in all of this, and if this proposed approach is what gets some of those industry laggards over the hump to actually embrace remote work and hybrid work, then I think to me it's kind of, and I don't like using the term too often, but it's kind of like the entry level drug for people who are pretty entrenched and pretty calcified in their approach. If this is what's going to shift them, then I'd say that is probably a good thing. So, but I would also say, to wrap up on this point, is that if you really want to look at what works, look at the behaviors of companies that have incorporated in the last, probably, let's say, 5 to 10 years, and ask yourself the question, do they even have offices? And in the main, the answer is no, because they believe them to be expensive and they believe them to be not as productive as people working from home. And they also know that the employee retention is actually better. So in a way, this is some progress. Now, to me, some people could say it's negative progress. It's progress built on negativity. And if that's what it takes for us to leap forward into the future, then I'm willing to hold my nose and watch companies do this in the hope that some good will come out of it. I don't believe it's the best approach, but it's an approach.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and there's something to be said about, like, let's not be like 100% zealots, my way or the highway.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna have to give a little bit of leeway. But it is interesting what you're saying about the offices. One of the articles we had this month is about Glassdoor closing the last two offices they have. So a lot of companies are closing everything. So then they have to think how to onboard new people, and it is possible, but I agree with you.
But
Maybe we find the middle ground for a while.
see what's up. What that is going to lead into is the more and more companies that shut down their offices. What they're not shutting down the need for people to get together. What they're doing is they're
Of
shutting
course.
down. Let's call it essentially. They're minimizing the liability or the cost, should I say, of actually having an office, but they still have the need for people to get together. So what we're seeing in this kind of third space category of not home and not office, there are a lot of companies who are doing quite well, and quite they're the interesting variants on kind of the old WeWork or co-working space. So there's a lot of movement happening in that space. And I find that to be one of the more interesting arenas, is this whole kind of third space and the evolution of space, because people do need to get together. The frequency of getting together
Absolutely.
varies across companies, it varies across geographies. So there's an awful lot there. But really, it's something we've talked about on a number of occasions. It depends on the company, the division, the department, the team. It can depend on the leader. It can depend on the geographic proximity of people. So there, anybody who tries a one size fits all, I think is going to be sorely disappointed.
It will be, yes. And I think that's the tricky thing here, that you have to make it your own way. And that's always hard, right? Like people want these cookie cutter solutions, but the reality is what works for one organization is not going to. But what's interesting, we have another article from LinkedIn, which
Mm.
kind of once again proves that what people want and what organizations give them is still not matching. So new data is showing that basically a third of employees want on-site, a third want hybrid, and a third want remote. Um, but the reality is that currently 60% of jobs are on-site, so that's already quite a mismatch. 30% are hybrid. Let's say that's kind of matches, if we go third, but then only 10 are fully remote. So demand supply not quite working. What do you think about all this, John?
Oh. Well, look, the essence of any harmonious and functioning marketplace is that supply and demand remain relatively close to each other. So clearly, what you've identified is we have a significant mismatch. Now, mismatches lead to some wild behaviors, and there's some outlined in this article, which I thought was really interesting. They talked about extreme commuting, which is commuting more than 90 minutes to work, and they
Oh
cited an
God,
example of
no.
people who are flying in the US, 2 hour flight to an office to work and then coming back because it's cheaper. Now, if that is cheaper, um, it may well be cheaper from a cost perspective, but from a wear and tear perspective, it's significant. Now, to think that that doesn't exist elsewhere and it only exists in the US is a pure fallacy. I know people who live in Boston who work in New York, and in the current environment, their obligation is to be in an office 2 or 3 days a week. So they'll fly down on a Tuesday, work Tuesday, stay in a hotel Tuesday night, work Wednesday, maybe stay in a second night, and then fly home on Thursday. And the value to them of maintaining the primary residence in a place like Boston versus moving to New York is significant. That's replicated country by country, city, but it's basically in every continent. You look at
Yeah.
Dublin Airport. You go to Dublin Airport on a Monday morning, the number of people who are flying to London to go work for the week, significant. Then within a
Mhm.
country, I see it every week. Every time I get a train from Cork to Dublin, I see a lot of people who are actually living in Cork who are traveling significant distances, be it for a day or two or three. So this will always be the case. And every single recruiter that I've spoken to in the last probably year tells me right up front that candidates that they talk to, that they're trying to get interested in jobs, invariably ask about remote working or the approach to hybrid within the first few minutes of any exploratory conversation. So clearly, you have a significant market misalignment here, and it will probably continue for a while, but it is easing over time. And what I would encourage people to do is not to be disillusioned, because we're in year 4 of this tectonic plate shift, this cataclysmic shift in work practices. And, it's really only in the last couple of years that people have been referring to work as an output, because historically it has been a place. I mean, the term workplace, right? But some people still use that as a term that work must be a place. So I would urge some caution. This will take a lot of time, but the data that this article shows is there is a significant mismatch, and anytime there's a mismatch, there will be a realignment.
Absolutely, and it's interesting. We were talking before we started recording. We're currently hiring in Boundless. I've just hired 2 people on my team, And both of them, they love the company, they love our mission. But one of the main things that really attracted them to the job, and what they've said as feedback, is just this ultimate flexibility that they have, this freedom. And they're both based in the UK. If they want to, they can go and book a co-working space, or they can work from home. Doesn't matter. And it's interesting, like even right now, that really puts us at a like advantage in hiring, because we give that freedom. So I suppose the fully remote in particular, it's still not there. And there's just people that prefer to work that way. So I guess the likes of us benefit until everyone else kind of adopts it. Next up, we have a really interesting article in the Atlantic, and it raises something really important, I think. So we all know that hybrid, is great for people's sense of freedom. It's, as we've seen, it's great for productivity. However, people are unhappy. There are a number of people that are unhappy. So the author, Cal Newport, who's an associate professor of computer science at Georgetown University, has a few books, really looked into this. Like, why are these stats coming out that people are unhappy if they have this freedom? So what he uncovers, and his theory and hypotheses, is that the slight problem with hybrid is that it creates something he calls an overhead tax. And essentially this is, you're given loads of extra things to do. It's very easy when you're working hybrid, to kind of always be on, and someone just sends you, hey, can you help me with this report, or hey, can you help me with that? And then that then trickles down into meetings, conversations, and it's all on top of everything else, right? And hybrid then becomes, even on days when it's kind of fully remote and it's meant to be maybe more no distractions, while hybrid in the office is all about connection, that we're kind of, until we learn how to do hybrid better and how to kind of offer the headspace, and if we keep asking for these overhead taxes, overhead tasks that create taxes, this is going to continue. What do you think of this? Because I think it's an important point that he's making here, as much as we love hybrid.
Yeah, I think Cal Newport has written a number of books on this topic, all of which kind of hit the mark, to be honest with you. There's a great one, Digital Minimalism, which I'd recommend to people, which helps manage the distractions and kind of questions our devotion to devices like this, etc. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of meaning in it. Now, I think the essence of what he's saying is that uh, business is spelt with an I rather than a Y. A lot of people spell it with a Y, and they think it's all about busyness. No, it's not
Yes.
about busyness. It's about business. And you know, routinely in my career, I've heard people talk about how busy they are. You go look at their calendar, and really what it is meeting after meeting. Now, the challenge is, if you're in meetings all the time, when are you actually getting to do the work? So what really is, and there was a report from Microsoft in 2022 that talked about the number of online meetings had like exploded. There were 2 or 3x what they had been before,
Yeah.
and so really you got to think about what companies have done and are doing now. Fortunately, I was at Shopify at a time when they addressed this, and they've done it subsequently. And I mean, the key thing was the identification that meetings for the sake of meetings is a massive time suck. It literally
Yeah.
just takes the oxygen out of the room. And the real beauty of remote work is the ability to do deep work in an undistracted environment in which you are doing your best work, which is in a relatively quiet space, where you do basically, you just do your best work. So letting that happen and creating an environment where that is the primary function is a very important thing. So let me go back to the example of Shopify. It was, I think, 2018. We were all called into a room, and the CEO basically said, effective immediately, what we've done is we have taken all meetings out of the calendar on Wednesday, and it became no meeting Wednesday. And so what was done was sending a very clear message to people that, meetings do not actually necessarily in and to themselves generate revenue and generate business. For a lot of meetings are there for the sake of meetings. So by making Wednesdays meeting free, the focus of attention was on doing deep work, and everybody was encouraged to spend time. That was the time to do the project work, and I had never seen that approach happen, or never seen that approach in any other company before. And I found it quite interesting and I found it difficult at the start because, I was one of those people who, I suppose, I felt some worth in people needing me, which is a terribly vulnerable thing to say as a leader. Like, if you didn't have a meeting, then I wasn't, how could I be leading? But really, I needed to do my work, and I needed to do my planning and my strategic thought process. And I then started gravitating towards this whole thing of Wednesdays. Now, the other thing that happened at the time, and it was another really good thing that was adopted, was um, there was an auto cancel of all repeat meetings, which I thought was a really interesting thing. Now, all of the meetings ended up in the junk folder, and if you wanted to reinstate the meetings, you could go and pull them back out of the junk folder and put them back in, but it needed to be intentional. So what it did was it challenged the intent. And anything that challenges the intent is a good thing, because you're just doubling down, going, yes, that is absolutely the right thing to do. The follow-on thing, which I thought was really interesting, and this happened in the last probably, I think, a year and a half I think it was at Shopify also did this, was they set a dollar cost based upon the people in a meeting, the people who were invited to a meeting, just set the dollar cost on an hourly rate, approximate hourly rate based upon obviously an HR file. What is the cost of this meeting? Now, if you've ever had somebody do that, to me, that is the ultimate of it's the ultimate measure, which is this meeting worth that amount of time, effort, and energy in terms of the physical cost, not alone the opportunity cost. So if you're going to bring somebody at a senior level who should be focused on the really important things into a meeting to talk about something mundane, and you see a very large dollar cost for that meeting, I would hope and it would sharpen your resolve and sharpen your focus in terms of calling meetings. So, these are the things that organizations do to manage the process. So it can be done.
Yeah, no, I love this. We talk about this, when we do meetings, and there's a bunch of people in these meetings. We talk about, but in a more abstract way. This is, that's a lot of time from, a lot of, dollars, as you say. But I love the fact that you actually put a number to it. I think I might suggest that, because I mean, look, I'm as guilty as the next person. Calling meetings, and let's just talk about it. It's easier. I think, I can really relate to the vulnerability you talk about. Like, if you manage people, it's, are you really managing them if you're not having meetings with them? And if you remember, like, I think that was one of the reasons why middle management really struggled with remote, and I'm sure they still do, because it's like, well, clearly people can do their work, and it's like, am I really needed, if I'm not constantly in meetings with people? So it definitely brings up some insecurities. But yeah, no, I really love Carl's idea of, basically, when it's a remote day, meetings are off the calendar, Slack is off, you're not allowed to message people, and unless there is, like, the house is burning or something, the website is down. I can give examples from, like, my area of expertise, what are the things. But then if otherwise you can't, well, that's going to bring the number of these tasks being sent to less. So then the overhead tax goes down, but also people are actually focused. One of the reasons why I enjoyed working from Vietnam is because, I was 7 hours ahead of Ireland. So even if I ended up doing something with my time in the morning, when I started working, I still had like 3-4 hours of uninterrupted time. I could think, I could strategize, like the things you talk about. It's definitely coming back to Ireland is one thing I miss. So now it's on me, and that's why I think I found the article so interesting. It's on me to figure out how I bring this back. What are the days when I just kill slack and work on my insecurities of, no, I won't be there if they need me, but it's like the likelihood of, something super urgent happening. But yeah, so I think it's a good one. Another thing we have this month, it's an excellent article from in McKinsey, and it's really interesting. Basically, this one focuses on, okay, how do we do hybrid well, which is very interesting because if you remember, maybe about 6 months ago, in episode 5, we had a different study from McKinsey, which was actually on the flip side, was showing all of the reasons why hybrid isn't working, and all of the things that were kind of companies were struggling with. There were things like not fully leveraging workplace technology, not creating effective work from anywhere systems, failing to implement test and measure systems, lacking comprehensive documentation of processes. So now, 6 months later, they're kind of showcasing their organizational health index, which is their proprietary kind of process documentation index thing. And, in it, they're saying, for success, remove ambiguity, reset performance expectations, be transparent. And the place where they're bringing this up from is basically studying fully remote companies. So McKinsey is saying, these guys have figured something out here. So let's look at them and let's study. What do you think about all this?
I'd agree with you. This is one of the more interesting pieces of work I've seen, probably in recent times. It's the first. McKinsey has this really interesting thing called the Organizational Health Index, the OHI, and it's the first time that they've used this proprietary index to actually connect flexible work practices to organizational health. And lo and behold, what they discovered is fully remote organizations actually, surprise, surprise, set the standard for organizational culture. Now, that's probably a complete shock to many of the CEOs who've been out there saying that fully remote or hybrid organizations damage organizational culture. But the data from McKinsey, who've studied thousands of companies across well over 100 countries, it's a really important study. So for me, this is yet another time we need to make the point that a physical office does not make a culture. It's the people and the processes within that make the culture. And as you said, the article lays out probably the 6 key priorities that are so deeply ingrained within a culture of fully remote companies that they need to be examined, because all of these can be actually brought back. And if companies stubbornly want to stay in office or want hybrid, by addressing some of the things that the fully remote companies do, you're probably going to improve your culture anyway. So everybody can learn from this. So, as I said, it laid out those 6 key priorities. And they said that they help employees connect and collaborate across locations and time zones while enabling top quartile performance. Who does not want to enable top quartile performance? And organizations that have adopted this, it is deemed to be an accelerator for their organizational health. So let's deal with, you mentioned a few of them. Let's deal with a few with them here. So removing ambiguity about work practices. Thankfully, wow, properly set expectations, emphasize clear and consistent meeting protocols, which we just talked about, incorporating proper asynchronous work practices. These are all really, really important things. And these are just not synonymous to remote work. That's for all type of work. Okay? Because that will actually enhance role clarity and enhance operational discipline. Second one, resetting performance expectations. So here you got an opportunity to create an environment where people who are on site and people who are off site feel like they're on an equal footing. And that's really, really important. So you don't have a them and an us. And why this is really important is that, as companies are now, many companies are multinational and have offices across different cities and different countries. You routinely hear people, well, we don't get the same benefits as head office. We're not listened to like other people. So really, this is an opportunity to put everybody on an even keel. And the thing that puts people on an even keel, Irina, as you well know, is by having a remote first approach, not remote only, but remote first, which means everybody is on let's call it an equal playing field. So it doesn't matter whether you're in the head office in Dublin or whether you're in a subsidiary office in Zaragoza in Spain. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are. If you're working from home in Bulgaria, it doesn't matter. Just make sure if everybody's on an even keel and on an even platform, it's good. I suppose the third one is being transparent. And like the most important thing is, the single source of truth for all managers. And some of the most effective companies in the remote space, Atlassian, GitLab, et cetera, Shopify, they all have a regularly updated handbook that talks about, and it's for a lot of companies, they've open sourced this as well. And it lays out all of the things they do, be it rules, norms, etc. And it encourages openness, it encourages honesty, it encourages knowledge sharing, and actually lays bare this is the process by which the company works. The next one is being purposeful about where people work. So, you're going to get good people if you actually have a more geographically dispersed organization. You're going to get the right people with the skill set. You're going to get more diversity. And, that strategic intentionality of actually opening up where people work actually is going to be I suppose, a growth accelerator. Then the other one, fostering trust and a sense of support. Any company that develops a welcoming work environment through, and I mentioned it, inclusion and belonging, that drives supportive leadership. It drives openness. It drives trust. So the organizations what the Organizational Health Index from McKinsey discovered was that remote working companies actually do the best job at fostering trust and a sense of support. Now, that's not really going to sit well with the people who are banging the drum for come back to the office on the basis that the only way we can trust you is if I can see you, which is the ultimate way of saying I don't trust you. It's the ultimate.
Yeah.
And then the last one, which I thought was really good, was the test and learn. If you're not trying things out and iterating, then you're not learning. So a lot of the companies that have gone to fully remote, and I mentioned a few of them, Atlassian, Shopify, GitLab, et cetera, have learned how to make decisions very quickly and then also assess, I wouldn't say very quickly, intentionally, but doing it decisively.
Yeah.
Assessing what's working, then iterating and trying to improve, sharing the lessons with everybody, sharing the failures as well as the successes. And that really drives an empowerment of leadership. And I suppose it drives the most important thing, which is data-driven decision-making. So this to me is one of the better articles that came out in recent times. And I think it's a significant body of work. And there's a couple of the authors of this that I follow online who I think have done an excellent job. Phil Kirshner and Alex Camp, primarily, are two of the authors of this. And I would encourage people to follow them on LinkedIn because they produce pretty darn good work. So it's an excellent article.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And actually, if people are interested in having an inside look into one of these companies that are doing a great job at it, that you mentioned, Atlassian, I would recommend people to go back to our previous episode where we devoted pretty much the entirety of it to a report that Atlassian posted early in the year, around 1,000 days of doing distributed work. And it's full of really tangible advice on how to run meetings, how to make decisions. So they really opened the gates to how they've made it work. So highly recommended.
And
Now,
one quick thing on Atlassian. One of the most important things they talk about is being transparent, which is exactly the thing, that the
yeah,
thread that goes right through everything that McKinsey said. So that the Atlassian report is a great one to read once you've actually read the McKinsey article.
yeah, no, absolutely, and we'll link to it in the show notes. Now, finally, we have a, it's not a tongue in cheek, but it's like a slightly funnier article in the Guardian, and it's always nice to see articles like that in major publications because you know that they're going to get like quite a lot of eyes on them. And this one is about the sometimes expected and unexpected benefits of remote work. Now, they have some of the usual ones that you and I have talked plenty about around saving time and money, on commuting, having time for personal stuff. But they bring a couple of other ones which I found really interesting. One is, turns out people are eating more fruit and veg, always a good thing, more home cooked meals, which we know is better. Their homes get robbed less because they're actually home. So,
Yep.
burglaries are less a thing. And also turns out their homes are now kind of much more designery because a lot of the luxury brands have whole sections on kind of homeware that's very design. Apparently, Harrods in the UK have a whole section with Gucci homeware and stuff. So more design rates and design stuff, and also kind of the high street is also moving more towards the suburbs and smaller cities because that's where people are. They don't necessarily go to the city.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about this article? What do you think about some of the things they mention, and the fact that Guardian is now writing about it?
Yeah, look, I actually think it's a reasonably well balanced look at some really interesting aspects of remote work that some have been positively floated, some negatively floated by various media outlets. And of course, as you outlined, it has the inevitable clickbait pieces that we're used to. So, let's look at I think they talk about families being one of them. So, really interesting thing is that a gain of 10% in work from home numbers leads to about a 1% gain of women and mothers in employment. So like that's a really important thing because if you go back historically and look at some of the economic drivers in many countries, it was women coming into the workplace were the single biggest drivers of the US economy post-war, the UK economy in the 60s, the Irish economy in the late 70s, early 80s. So it is an economic driver, and it is important, not just from an economic perspective, but from a social perspective and from an equity perspective. So work from home really helps on that front. On the flip side, and that's why the article is kind of interesting because they kind of talk about the pros and cons in it. They talk also in Japan about the fact that it's led to more men engaging in household chores in a country that was quite patriarchal in nature. Now, they also then talk about the fact that this family time needs to be balanced because clearly more people working from home, there has been an intersection or an overlapping or basically a conflict between work time and family time. So yes, it's been an enormous benefit to families. However, you need to be very careful that that work time doesn't impact on family time. Food was another interesting one. And like you said, a lot more people eating fruits and veg and dairy products and home cooked foods. It is an indefatigable truth that if you eat less processed food and you know the ingredients that go into the food, you're going to feel better and healthier. Okay, very, very clearly. And that has been I suppose, proven over time. Now, this comes at a risk, right? You're that much closer to the fridge at all times during the
Yeah.
day. So it leads to more snacking. It also, interestingly, and I thought the article was really balanced in saying this. So it leads to more snacking, not healthy. It leads to more cigarettes, not healthy. It leads to more alcohol, not healthy. In fact, one of the studies that they cite says that about 47% of workers who moved to home work actually gained weight. So yeah, there are negatives to it, and we need to be very careful about how we balance the positives and the negatives. So food is that's a behavioral thing. And it just needs to be front and central. About, like, that's one of the reasons why some of the companies that I chat with, they actually not that they have cookery classes or whatever, but they actually encourage healthy eating, and it's part of kind of the corporate well-being, that they encourage people and show people a variety of different things to do and to how to manage themselves from a food perspective. And then there was, of course, the ultimate clickbait of the headline was on the crime side of things, and I thought that was really interesting. And they cited research from, I think, Sheffield University that found that a 10% increase in home working led to a 4% fall in burglaries. Now that does fit into the category of no shit, Sherlock. It really does. With more people at home, you're less
Yeah.
likely to get burgled. But it's a beautiful, it's a great headline that gets people going. So I had a smile on my face on it, because it is a factual thing. And is it the reason why we should advance home working, that it reduces burglaries? No, but it's an interesting insight. The other fun one, I thought, and this has actually also been investigated by Nick Bloom and the WFH guys as well, is the increase in the number of rounds of golf being played. So what the article talks about
Yeah.
is kind of what they talked about, the people sneaking out for the midweek manicure or a round of golf. And I found that to be kind of interesting and funny. Does that mean, like, if you decide to go for a round of golf on a Wednesday, because a Wednesday afternoon, because the golf course is free on a Wednesday, does that mean you're being less productive? No, if you're actually getting your work done and you're spreading your work out over a longer period of time, and you choose that to be the time when you go and play golf, or the time when you go and get a manicure, and you get your work done, then I think it's actually a benefit rather than
It really
a
is.
drag.
It really is. And yeah, and it's ultimately, yeah, it's not bums on seats, it's work being done. But that's a whole shift of, it's not about being online from 9 to 5.
Correct.
It's being online whenever you need to do your work and doing your work. But
So
that's probably a shift that needs a little bit more time
correct.
for
But
the
so you got what?
majority of companies.
Sorry to interrupt, but you got to be very careful here, because what you'll see people do, you'll see journalists do, and copywriters doing, or copy editors doing, is zeroing in on the clickbait headlines. So you had somebody
Always.
cited in the article who was an advisory member of the British Beauty Council saying, thanks to more flexible work patterns since COVID, we've seen a rise in the midweek manicure, right? That is a classic thing to put in front of somebody who's railing against remote work as an example as to why it shouldn't happen. But
Yeah.
really, it's just BS. I mean, it's a BS headline, and you've got to peel back behind that to work. Does that lead to if an employee can go out and get a manicure on a Wednesday afternoon at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and by the way, get their work done, because they'll be back in their home office and they'll probably be working until 6 or 7 in the evening, whatever. Does that mean that employee is not doing their work? No, it doesn't. Work gets done.
Absolutely.
And actually they're managing their life as well as managing their work. Get over it.
That's it. That's a good way to end things. And it's why you and I started this a year ago, to kind of recognize the BS in titles, especially the clickbait ones, and be like, think twice about this. Anyways, John, that's all we have time for today. Thank you as always for your candid opinions and myth busting. Thanks everyone for tuning in to listen in. We'll be back next month. And as a reminder, you can always send us your suggestions of things that we cover. If we haven't, there's definitely plenty of things going on. But for now, thank you, John. Hope Cork weather is good. Spring has sprung. And I will talk to you soon.
Take care, Irina. Thank you.
Bye.